So I've been using the iPhone 13 Pro again in 2026, not as a throwback, not as like nostalgia test, but just in my actual daily life. Waking up early, going to work, answering emails, watching YouTube, taking random photos of things I like, just normal everyday stuff. And I also spent time using newer iPhones alongside it, like the iPhone 17 and 17 Pro. And honestly, this video is probably not what you expect. Because if you're still using an iPhone 13 Pro right now, you really might not need to upgrade, or maybe you do. Let's talk about it. So my day usually starts pretty early, around 6 a.m. I grab my phone, check a few things, maybe scroll a bit, then head out to the door. Sometimes I'm working from home, but most days I'm out, commuting, moving around. And throughout the day, my phone is just always there. YouTube, emails, navigation, banking, social media, just constantly in use. And what surprised me is how normal everything feels. There's no moment where I pick it up and think, this feels really old. It just works. Scrolling is smooth because it has 120 Hz refresh rate, apps open quickly, switching between things feel fast. Even when I compare directly to newer iPhones, the difference is kind of small. Like yes, technically the newer iPhones are faster, more powerful and more efficient, but in real life, you don't really feel it sometimes. There were maybe a few tiny moments where the 13 Pro paused for a few seconds, like a micro hesitation, but nothing that actually interrupted what I was doing. And that's kind of the theme of this phone in 2026. It's not trying to impress you, it just quietly keeps up. I feel like performance is one of those things people overanalyze a lot. But if I'm being completely honest, for what I actually do on my phone, this is more than enough. I'm not editing heavy videos on it, I'd rather do that on my MacBook Pro. I'm not playing super demanding games. I'm watching content, replying to emails, navigating, taking photos, occasionally editing a photo, maybe playing a game of chess here and there. And for all of that, it feels almost the same as a new phone. Even when I had the iPhone 17 and 17 Pro next to it, I never had that moment where I thought, okay, yeah, this is a huge difference. I mean, technically there is a difference of course, but it's not night and day. The newer phones are a bit faster, sure, but not in a way that changes your day. So I've been using the iPhone 13 Pro camera a lot again recently. Not as my main YouTube camera, but for everything else. Daily life, random moments, family photos, little video clips, even some B-roll here and there. And the best way I can describe it is, it's just reliable. Like almost boringly reliable. It doesn't really surprise me, I have to say, but it also doesn't disappoint me. Photos look sharp, clean and balanced. Videos look smooth and detailed. Daylight is great. Low light, still really solid. And I think what stood out to me most is that it doesn't feel outdated. Yes, the newer iPhones technically have better cameras with 48 megapixels and the 17 Pro has better zoom options, and you can see a difference in photos when you zoom in all the way. The newer iPhones have more detail, especially in low light scenes. But the gap is sometimes smaller than you would expect. Like you're not suddenly getting completely different results. You're getting improved versions of something that was already very good. And for most people, even if you're creating content casually, this is more than enough. It shoots 4K video, everything looks crisp, colors are nice, and even things like cinematic modes still look really good. And I think that's kind of the point. You're not missing out on the experience. Now let's move on to the battery. And this is probably the one area where you actually notice that this isn't the brand new phone anymore. My battery health is at around 75%, so obviously it's not like in day one anymore. But still, I start my day at 100%. And by the afternoon, I'm usually somewhere between 15 and 25%, which honestly is still totally usable. I don't feel stressed about it, I don't feel like I constantly need to charge, it just means I'm a little more aware of it than I used to be. And the nice thing is, this isn't even a permanent issue. If it really starts bothering you, you can just replace the battery at Apple for like $100. And suddenly, it feels fresh again. So yes, it's not perfect anymore, but it's also not a deal breaker. I have the Sierra Blue version and I still think this phone looks really good, like genuinely premium. The stainless steel frame gives that kind of polished, almost jewelry-like feel. It doesn't feel cheap, it doesn't feel outdated, it feels intentional. And I actually prefer this design over the newer Pro models. That's just personal taste, but something about it feels elegant and more classic. In the hand it feels solid, not too light, not too heavy, just balance. Although I will say when you directly compare it to something like the iPhone 17, you do notice one thing. The edges. The iPhone 13 Pro is more sharp, more squared off, and after holding it for a long time you can feel that. The newer phones are slightly more rounded at the edges and a little more comfortable. But again, it's one of those things you only really notice in comparison. On its own, it still feels great, but I must honestly say that I like the rounded edges on the newer phones more. My 13 Pro definitely has a bit of a used look now. The stainless steel frame has some light scratches. If I hold it at certain angles, I can see tiny micro scratches on the screen, but during normal use, you see nothing, like literally nothing. It makes the phone feel like something I've actually lived with, not something I'm trying to keep perfect. Face ID still works exactly like it did on day one, fast, reliable, even at weird angles. It's one of those features you don't think about it until it stops working, and here, it still works like it did on day one. Everything else about the phone feels the same way. No friction, no weird issues, no this used to be better, just sometimes a tiny pause here and there. So naturally, I spent some time using the newer iPhones as well. And here's the honest truth. They are better. But not in a way that changes your life. Yes, they have newer features, they look slightly different, they're technically more advanced and more efficient. But when I went back to the iPhone 13 Pro, I didn't feel like I was missing something important. There was no moment where I thought, okay, I need to upgrade. And I think that says everything. The iPhone 13 Pro doesn't have things like newer camera upgrades with 48 megapixels, the dynamic island, the always on display, and the camera control button. And yeah, those features are really nice. If you have them, you will probably enjoy them. But if you don't, it's really not a big deal. Because none of those things fundamentally change how you use your phone. They're additions, not necessities. And when the newer iPhones came out, I never had that moment where I thought, I need this. Not because the new iPhones aren't good, they are actually very good, but because they're not different enough when you're using them in everyday life. Upgrading makes sense when there's a specific feature you really like and your current phone is holding you back. Something that actually changes how the device fits into your life. And for some people, that's just not there. And there aren't any real downsides, but if I really try to find something, I'd say the battery isn't as strong as it used to be. The phone can get hot when you're filming a lot or when you're playing games that are graphically very intensive, and the edges are a bit sharp compared to newer phones. That's kind of it. Everything else still holds up really well. So should you upgrade? If you have an iPhone 13 Pro right now and it's not heavily scratched or damaged in any way and it works fine, I would say don't upgrade, at least not right now. Because this phone still feels complete and it still does everything you probably need. It still feels fast, reliable and premium, and most importantly, it still feels good to use. But at the same time, I totally understand when someone is thinking about upgrading to the iPhone 17 or 17 Pro. The bezels are thinner and they are technically better, and there are actually some features that are might worth upgrading. But in 2026, the iPhone 13 Pro still fits perfectly. Let me know in the comments what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.